I stood in the doorway of the dining room, the scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon filling the air like a memory I wasn't supposed to witness. The table gleamed under the chandelier, my mother's best china, the crystal, glasses that only came out once a year, the centerpiece of pine and red berries she'd spent all morning arranging. 23 plates. I'd counted them twice, my eyes moving slowly across each setting, each name card written in her careful script. My name wasn't there. They were laughing. My father at the head of the table, carving knife in hand, telling some story about his fishing trip last summer. My mother beside him, her face bright with the kind of joy I hadn't seen directed at me in years. My sister Emma sat across from them, her fiancé David's hand resting possessively on her shoulder. Cousins, aunts, uncles, even Emma's college friends had been invited. The room was full of warmth and belonging, a perfect holiday tableau. I was the only piece that didn't fit. No one had told me. No group text, no phone call, no casual mention over breakfast last week when I'd visited to drop off Emma's birthday present. They'd simply planned it, organised it, prepared for it, without me. I'd only found out because I'd driven over on impulse, thinking I'd surprise them, maybe help with the cooking. I'd used my old key, the one I still carried even though I'd moved out 3 years ago. The door had been unlocked anyway. They weren't expecting anyone else. Emma looked up then, her eyes meeting mine across the room. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or guilt, but it passed so quickly I might have imagined it. She leaned over and whispered something to David, who glanced my way with polite disinterest before returning his attention to his wine. She didn't call out to me, didn't stand up, didn't even smile. My mother's voice rose above the others, bright and performative. Emma, darling, tell everyone about the wedding venue you chose. It's absolutely stunning. Emma's face lit up like a Christmas ornament catching the light. Oh, it's this beautiful estate upstate. Gardens, a fountain, space for 200 guests. 200 guests. I wondered if I'd be invited to that either. I backed away from the doorway slowly, carefully, as if any sudden movement might shatter something already broken. My chest felt tight, compressed, like someone had reached inside and squeezed. The laughter from the dining room followed me down the hallway, through the foyer, out to the front door I closed with a soft click that no one would hear. The cold December air hit my face, sharp and clarifying. I stood on the porch for a long moment, looking at the wreaths on the windows, the lights my father had strung along the eaves. Everything looked festive and alive. Everything looked like home, but it wasn't. Not anymore. Maybe it never had been. I drove home in silence, my hand steady on the wheel, even though something inside me was crumbling. My apartment was dark when I arrived, empty and quiet in a way that felt different from the emptiness I'd grown accustomed to. This was the loneliness of exclusion, of being erased from your own family's narrative. I sat on my couch and stared at my phone. No missed calls, no texts. No one had noticed I'd been there at all. The days that followed blurred together. I went to work at the advertising firm where I'd been an associate designer for the past 2 years, smiled at my colleagues, attended meetings about campaigns I barely cared about. I came home to the same silent apartment, ate dinner alone and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying that Christmas dinner in my mind. The table with 23 plates, Emma's bright laugh, my mother's careful avoidance of my existence. I wondered when it had started, this systematic erasure. When had I become optional? Forgettable? A person who could be left out without consequence? Emma called on New Year's Eve. I almost didn't answer. Olivia? Hey, I know it's been a while since we talked. I just wanted to wish you a happy new year. Her voice was cheerful, unburdened. She didn't mention Christmas. Didn't apologise for the empty place at their perfect table. I held the phone against my ear and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. "Thanks," I said. "You too. So, listen. I'm sending out save the dates for the wedding soon. Make sure I have your current address, okay?" An afterthought, an obligation. The sister who had to be invited because it would look bad if she wasn't. "Sure," I said. We talked for 3 more minutes, surface conversation about weather and work, and nothing that mattered. When we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my apartment and felt the weight of insignificance press down on me like winter snow. I started having headaches in January. Small ones at first, just pressure behind my eyes that I blamed on long hours staring at computer screens. Then, they got worse. Sharp, sudden pains that left me breathless and gripping the edge of my desk. I took ibuprofen and told myself it was stress. By February, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The doctor's office was sterile and too bright, the kind of place where bad news was delivered with clinical detachment. The neurologist showed me scans of my brain, pointing to shadows I didn't understand with medical terminology that felt like a foreign language. She explained it twice, patiently, as if repetition would make the reality easier to accept. Brain tumour, inoperable. 6 months, maybe 8 if I was lucky. I sat in that office chair and felt nothing. No tears, no panic, no desperate bargaining with a God I'd stopped believing in years ago. Just a strange, distant curiosity about how fitting it was to finally have my absence made permanent, official. "Who should we call?" the nurse asked gently. "Family? Someone to drive you home?" "No one," I said. "I'm fine." I drove home alone and climbed into bed with my clothes still on. The headache had faded to a dull throb, or maybe I'd just gotten used to it. I thought about calling my parents, about telling them I was dying, about forcing them to acknowledge me one last time before it was too late. But I didn't. Because I already knew what would happen. Emma would become the centre of their grief, their comfort, their focus. They would cry over the daughter they'd forgotten about, would rewrite history to make themselves the victims of tragedy instead of the architects of my isolation. I didn't want their delayed love, their guilty mourning. Better to disappear quietly, to make it easy for them. The weeks passed in a strange, suspended state. I stopped going to work, used my accumulated sick days and vacation time without explanation. My manager sent concerned emails I didn't answer. My co-workers left voicemails I didn't return. The world continued spinning, and I let it spin without me. Emma texted about bridesmaid dresses and shower invitations. I responded with single words, "Okay, sure, that sounds good," and she seemed satisfied with the minimal engagement. My mother called once to ask if I'd seen her missing serving platter, the one she thought she might have lent me years ago. I told her no, and we hung up after 90 seconds. They didn't notice I was disappearing. They'd already practiced my absence. In March, the headaches became unbearable. I spent entire days in bed, curtains drawn, world reduced to darkness and the sound of my own breathing. The pain was sharp and all-consuming, erasing everything else, memory, thought, identity. I existed only as a vessel for suffering. One night, lying in that darkness, I realised I was grateful. The pain gave me permission to let go, to stop fighting for a place in a family that had already moved on without me. My vision started to blur in early April. Double images, blind spots, moments where the world tilted sideways and I had to grip the wall to stay upright. I stopped eating because nothing tasted right anymore. My body was shutting down piece by piece, and I watched it happen with the detachment of someone observing a stranger's decline. Emma sent a group text about the bachelorette party. I read it through the haze of my fading sight and didn't respond. She called an hour later, irritation sharp in her voice. "Olivia, you didn't answer about the party. Are you coming or not? I need a head count." I held the phone loosely, barely feeling its weight in my hand. "I don't think so." "Why not?" She sounded more annoyed than concerned. Everyone's going. It's going to be so much fun. I'm just not feeling well. You're never feeling well lately. A sigh, heavy with exasperation. Look, I know you've been distant, but this is important to me. Can you just make an effort? Distant, as if I were the one who'd created the space between us. I'll try, I said, knowing I wouldn't. Okay, good. Her voice brightened immediately, moving on to the next item on her checklist. Oh, and I need you to pick up your bridesmaid dress from the boutique by next week. I gave them your measurements from last year, so it should fit fine. She hung up before I could respond. I set the phone down and closed my eyes. The darkness behind my eyelids felt deeper than it should have, more permanent. I wondered how much longer I had. Days, weeks, hours. The doctors had stopped returning my calls after I'd missed 3 appointments in a row. It didn't matter. I knew how this ended. I woke in the bathtub. Not woke exactly. Slipped back into consciousness like surfacing from deep water. The tiles were cold against my back. The water had long since drained away. I couldn't remember getting in. Couldn't remember deciding this was where I wanted to be when it happened. My head didn't hurt anymore. That should have frightened me, but it didn't. The absence of pain felt like grace. I tried to move and couldn't. My body had become something separate from my will, a heavy thing I no longer controlled. My breathing was shallow, barely there. The bathroom light flickered, or maybe it was my vision failing again, dimming at the edges. I thought about my family sitting around that Christmas table. The empty space where I should have been. The laughter and warmth I'd never quite been part of. I thought about Emma's wedding, the one I wouldn't attend. The bridesmaid dress hanging in a boutique somewhere, waiting for a body that would never fill it. I thought about all the ways I tried to matter and failed. My heartbeat slowed. The light faded. The cold of the tiles seeped into my bones, or maybe I was becoming the cold, dissolving into it. My last thought was simple, almost peaceful. At least now they won't have to forget about me. I'll already be gone. The world went still. The darkness was absolute, and then light. Not the harsh bathroom light I'd died under, but soft morning sun filtering through gauzy curtains I recognised but couldn't place. I opened my eyes and saw a ceiling painted pale yellow, a constellation of glow-in-the-dark stars arranged in patterns I'd memorised years ago. My childhood bedroom. I sat up too quickly and the room tilted, but not from illness, from disorientation, from the impossible reality of where I was. My body felt light, strong, painless. My vision was clear. My head was silent, free of the crushing weight that had defined my final months. I looked down at my hands. They were younger, smoother, unmarked by the IV bruises and medication side effects I'd lived with. I touched my face and felt the softness of skin that hadn't yet learned how to carry grief. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Not my phone, a different model, an older one. I picked it up with trembling fingers and checked the date. December 15th, 8 years ago. The breath left my lungs in a rush. I was 20 years old again, home from my junior year of college for winter break. The tumour hadn't started growing yet. I hadn't been excluded from Christmas dinner yet. Emma wasn't engaged yet. But I remembered. Every moment of the future I'd lived through, every dismissal, every absence, every lonely death in a bathtub while my family planned celebrations without me. The memories sat in my mind like a film I'd watched, clear and complete and undeniably mine. This wasn't a dream. This was something else entirely. A second chance, a reset, a rebirth. I stood up and walked to the mirror above my dresser. The girl looking back at me was young and healthy and whole, but her eyes held something ancient and knowing. The weight of a life already lived, already lost. I remembered dying, and I remembered everything that led to it. The knowledge settled over me like armour. This time, things would be different. Not because I would fight for their attention, or try harder to earn my place in a family that had already decided I was expendable. No. This time, I would choose myself first. I would build a life they couldn't exclude me from because it wouldn't revolve around them at all. I would matter, not to them, but to myself and to a world beyond the narrow confines of their seasonal gatherings and perfect table settings. I would rewrite the story. And this time, they wouldn't even be central characters. The door burst open without warning. Emma stood there in her pajamas, hair messy from sleep, expression bright with the thoughtless confidence of someone who'd never questioned her place in the world. "Olivia, Mum wants to know if you're coming to help with the Christmas shopping today. We're leaving in an hour." In my previous life, I had said yes immediately, eager for inclusion. I'd spent 6 hours trailing behind Emma and our mother while they picked out decorations and gifts, occasionally asking my opinion but rarely taking it. I'd carried their bags and pretended it felt like family time. Now, I looked at her and felt nothing but distant clarity. "No," I said simply. "I have other plans." Emma's face registered surprise, then slight annoyance. "What plans? You just got home yesterday." "Meeting up with some friends from high school." It wasn't true yet, but it would be. I'd already decided to reconnect with Naomi and Jessica, 2 girls I'd lost touch with in my previous life when I'd been too busy chasing my family's approval. They'd invited me to things I'd always turned down in favour of being available for Emma's needs or my parents' last-minute requests. Not anymore. "Oh." Emma hesitated in the doorway, clearly unaccustomed to me having a life that didn't accommodate hers. "Well, okay. I guess we'll see you later then." She left without the usual guilt trip, perhaps sensing something different in my tone, a firmness that hadn't been there before. I smiled at my reflection. The first small victory. The next few days, I moved through my old life like a ghost who'd learned the script by heart. I knew which conversations to avoid, which invitations to decline, which emotional traps to sidestep. When my mother asked if I'd help Emma address her early graduation party invitations, I said I had a paper to revise for my winter term class. When my father suggested I give up my Saturday to help him reorganise the garage while Emma went dress shopping with our mother, I reminded him I'd already committed to volunteering at the community centre, a lie that became truth when I actually went and signed up. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't making a point. I was simply absent in all the ways they'd eventually learned to be absent toward me. But I was doing it first, on my terms, for my own preservation. And I was building something else. Something mine. I met Naomi for coffee on December 18th. She looked exactly as I remembered. Bright copper hair, infectious laugh, the kind of person who made you feel seen just by listening. In my previous life, I'd let this friendship wither. Now, I treated it like the lifeline it was. "I can't believe you actually called," she said, wrapping me in a hug that felt like coming home. "It's been forever." "I know, I'm sorry, I got too caught up in..." I paused, searching for words that wouldn't reveal too much. "In things that didn't matter as much as I thought they did." "Well, you're here now, that's what counts," she grinned over her latte. "So what have you been up to? Still doing that design stuff?" We talked for 3 hours. She told me about her nursing program, her terrible dating life, her plans to travel after graduation. I listened and contributed, and felt something inside me begin to thaw, a part of myself I'd frozen in pursuit of family validation. When we parted ways, she hugged me again. "Let's not wait another 3 years to do this, okay?" "I promise," I said, and meant it. Jessica joined us 2 days later and then chatted with 2 more friends from our old study group. By Christmas Eve, I had plans for New Year's Eve, a standing weekly coffee date with Naomi, and an invitation to join Jessica's creative writing workshop that met Thursday evenings. I was creating a network, a support system, a life that existed independently of my family's acknowledgement. Christmas Eve arrived with the same festive energy I remembered. My mother cooked all day, the house filled with cinnamon and pine. Emma flitted around making last-minute decorations, her excitement palpable. My father strung lights and hummed carols off key, and I waited, because I knew what was coming. Dinner was at 6. My mother had mentioned it casually 3 days ago while I was passing through the kitchen. Don't forget, Christmas Eve dinner with the extended family, 6 o'clock sharp. I'd nodded without committing. At 5:30, Emma knocked on my bedroom door. Olivia, are you getting ready? People will be here soon. I was already dressed, not for their dinner, but for the event I'd actually planned to attend. A holiday charity gala that Jessica had invited me to, where her nonprofit was being honoured for their youth literacy programmes. I'd bought a ticket with money from my part-time campus job, and I'd bought a dress that made me feel elegant and separate from the girl who used to beg for scraps of attention. I'm not coming to dinner, I said calmly. Emma's face went blank with incomprehension. What? What do you mean you're not coming? I have other plans. But it's Christmas Eve, it's family dinner. The irony wasn't lost on me. In 8 years, she'd forget I existed on Christmas entirely. But right now, she couldn't imagine the holiday without the full set of family members in attendance, not because she valued me, but because my absence would disrupt the perfect picture. I know, but I already committed to something else. Olivia, you can't just skip Christmas Eve. Her voice rose slightly, confusion mixing with indignation. Mom planned everything around having all of us here. She'll be fine. You'll all be fine. I picked up my clutch and moved toward the door. I'll see you tomorrow. Where are you even going? A gala. For charity. It's important to me. I brushed past her before she could argue further. Downstairs, I could hear the first guests arriving. Aunt Marie's loud greeting, the sound of coats being hung, the clink of wine glasses, the machinery of family gathering clicking into place. My mother appeared in the hallway as I reached the front door. Olivia? You're not dressed for dinner. I have other plans tonight, Mum. I mentioned it earlier this week. I hadn't, but she wouldn't remember clearly enough to contradict me. Her face shifted through several emotions: surprise, disapproval, uncertainty. But everyone's coming. They'll expect to see you. I'm sorry, I already committed to this. Can't you reschedule? It's Christmas Eve. I could feel myself being pulled toward the old pattern, apologising, acquiescing, shrinking myself to fit their needs. But I thought about the bathtub, the cold tiles, the lonely death in an apartment no one visited. No, I said gently. I can't. Have a good evening. I walked out before she could respond. The gala was everything my family's dinner wasn't. Expansive, diverse, full of people genuinely interested in making connections beyond blood ties. Jessica introduced me to her non-profit colleagues, to donors, to other volunteers. I talked about my design work and discovered several people looking for creative help with their organisation's branding. I exchanged business cards. I laughed with strangers who became friends over the course of 3 hours. I felt seen in a way my family had never managed. When midnight approached, Jessica raised her glass. To Olivia, who actually showed up when she said she would, unlike half the people we invited. Everyone laughed and clinked glasses, and something warm and solid formed in my chest. Belonging. Not earned through desperate performance, but through simple presence and mutual respect. I took out my phone and saw 7 missed calls from my mother, 3 texts from Emma asking where I was, 2 from my father with the same question. I turned off my phone and toasted with people who would remember I existed. Christmas Day, I slept in. No frantic morning gift exchange. No mandatory breakfast in matching pajamas for photos Emma would post on social media. Just quiet and rest and the satisfaction of having chosen differently. I arrived at my parents' house at 2 p.m, the time my mother had specified for Christmas dinner weeks ago. The same time I'd always known about, even if no one had explicitly re-invited me in this timeline yet. The house was in chaos when I walked in. Emma was crying at the dining room table. My mother hovered nearby, looking simultaneously sympathetic and exasperated. My father stood in the kitchen doorway, clearly trying to stay out of it. "What's wrong?" I asked, though I felt nothing but clinical curiosity. Emma looked up, mascara smudged, face blotchy. "David broke up with me. On Christmas morning, he sent a text. In my previous life, David had been her fiancé, the man she'd married in that expensive estate wedding. But I'd changed the timeline by asserting my independence. My absence last night had apparently created a ripple effect. Emma had fought with David about something, maybe my family's annoyance at my defection, and he'd decided she was too dramatic. Or maybe he'd always been on the verge of leaving and just needed a catalyst. Either way, this wasn't my previous timeline anymore. The future was unwritten. "I'm sorry," I said, and felt the emptiness of the words. I wasn't glad she was hurt, but I wasn't devastated for her either. She was just another person going through something difficult, no more or less important than anyone else's struggles. My mother shot me a look. "Where were you last night? You missed everything." "I told you I had plans, a charity gala." "On Christmas Eve?" Her tone was heavy with judgment. "While your family was gathering?" "Yes." I met her eyes without flinching. "It was important to me." "More important than family?" The question hung in the air. In my old life, it would have crushed me. Now it just felt irrelevant. "Family is important," I said carefully. "But so is showing up for commitments I've made and building relationships with people who share my values." Emma made a choke sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "Must be nice to have it all figured out, Olivia." I looked at her, really looked at her. She was 22, beautiful, privileged, heartbroken over a boy who wasn't worth her tears. She would recover. She would find someone else. She would continue being the centre of our parents' attention. And I would build a life where that didn't matter anymore. "I don't have anything figured out," I said truthfully. "I'm just trying to make choices I won't regret." The months that followed were a study in parallel existence. I lived at home when I had to, winter break, spring break, summer before my senior year. But I existed on the periphery of their lives rather than at the mercy of them. I maintained my friendships with Naomi and Jessica. I took on freelance design projects that built my portfolio and my bank account. I started a blog about design and minimalism that slowly gained followers. I was polite to my family. I attended necessary gatherings. But I didn't wait by the phone for invitations that might not come. I didn't rearrange my life to accommodate their last-minute requests. I didn't shrink myself to make room for Emma's perpetual centre stage. My mother called it selfishness. I called it survival. Emma cycled through 3 more boyfriends that year. Each time, she'd call me crying when it ended, and I'd listen with the sympathy of someone who cared but wasn't consumed by her drama. I'd learnt the difference between supporting someone and drowning in their emotional chaos. My parents noticed the change but didn't know how to address it. I was still their daughter, still present, still technically part of the family. But I'd drawn boundaries they didn't remember agreeing to, and every time they pushed, I held firm. "You've become so distant," my mother said one evening in July. "I've become more independent," I corrected. "There's a difference." "You barely spend time with us anymore." "I spend the same amount of time I always have. I'm just also spending time on other things that matter to me." She didn't understand. Neither did my father. Emma was too absorbed in her own life to notice much beyond her immediate needs. But I was okay with that. I wasn't seeking their understanding anymore, just their acceptance of my boundaries. Senior year, I moved into an apartment with Naomi. My parents were hurt I didn't want to live at home and commute to campus. Emma was baffled I'd choose a shabby 2-bedroom over my perfectly good childhood room. I decorated my space with art I loved and furniture I'd found at estate sales. I worked on projects that excited me. I dated casually without looking for validation or permanence. I built a life that felt authentic instead of performative. And I waited for the Christmas that would prove whether I'd really changed anything or just delayed the inevitable. December rolled around like an echo of itself. My mother started planning the family gathering. Emma was newly engaged again to someone named Trevor I'd never heard of in my previous timeline, and was using the holiday as an opportunity to show him off to extended family. I waited for the invitation, watched my phone for the casual group text or the direct call. It didn't come. December 20th, I was at the apartment when Naomi asked about my holiday plans. Not sure yet, I said honestly. Might just stay here, cook something simple. By yourself? She frowned. Olivia, it's Christmas. I know, but my family hasn't actually invited me to anything yet. What? That's... She stopped, searching for words. That's horrible, I shrugged. It is what it is. No. She pulled out her phone with determination. You're coming to my family's Christmas. My mum makes enough food for an army anyway, and she loves having extra people. It's chaotic and loud and probably nothing like what you're used to, but at least you won't be alone. Something cracked in my chest. Not pain, but something softer. Gratitude. Relief. The knowledge that chosen family was real and valid, and sometimes more reliable than blood. Are you sure? I asked. Absolutely. My mum will be thrilled. She's been saying for years that I should bring more friends home. Thank you, I whispered. That's what friends do, she said simply. December 23rd, my phone finally rang. My mother's name on the screen. Olivia, hi sweetheart. Listen, I'm finalising numbers for Christmas dinner. You're coming, right? An afterthought, a head count confirmation. Not an invitation, an assumption. In my previous life, I'd never received even that much. This timeline was already different, but it wasn't different enough. Actually, I have other plans this year. Silence. Then, what? What do you mean, other plans? I'm spending Christmas with friends. But it's family Christmas. We always spend it together. The irony was almost poetic. Actually, you didn't invite me until just now, 3 days before Christmas, to confirm numbers. Well, of course you're invited. You're family. We don't need a formal invitation. I've made other commitments, Mum. I'll stop by on the 26th if you want, but I won't be there for Christmas dinner. Olivia, that's ridiculous. You can't just skip Christmas dinner because we didn't send you an engraved invitation. Emma will be so disappointed. She wanted you to meet Trevor properly. I'm sure she'll survive. My voice was calm, emotionless. I'll see you on the 26th. I hung up before she could argue further. The phone rang again immediately. I let it go to voicemail. Then again, and again. Text messages piled up, my mother, my father, even Emma sending a string of increasingly annoyed messages about my attitude and how I was ruining everything. I turned off my phone and made myself tea. I died alone in a bathtub once, forgotten and unmissed. I wouldn't spend my reborn life begging for scraps of attention from people who only remembered I existed when my absence inconvenienced them. Christmas Eve at Naomi's family home was everything mine wasn't. Chaotic, warm, inclusive. Her mother hugged me like she'd known me for years. Her 3 younger siblings dragged me into board games and cookie decorating. Her father told terrible dad jokes and insisted I try his world-famous eggnog, which was actually quite good. They didn't know me. But they welcomed me anyway. Christmas. Morning. Naomi's mother made enough breakfast for twice as many people as were present. We opened gifts in our pyjamas, including a small wrapped box with my name on it that Naomi's mum had apparently bought just in case. Inside was a simple silver bracelet with a compass charm. So you always find your way home, Naomi's mother said. Wherever home is for you, I cried. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that family wasn't about blood or obligation. It was about showing up, remembering, choosing to make space for someone at your table. I checked my phone for the first time in 2 days. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, 3 voicemails, all from my mother, each one progressing from frustrated to angry to worried. The last voicemail was from Emma. Fine, Olivia. If you want to be petty and skip Christmas because you didn't get a fancy invitation, whatever, but you're really hurting Mum and Dad. I hope you're happy. I deleted them all. On December 26th, I went to my parents' house as promised. The remnants of Christmas were everywhere. Wrapping paper still in the trash, leftovers in the fridge, Emma's engagement photos displayed on every surface. My mother was cold. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. Emma looked at me like I was a stranger who'd wandered in off the street. "How was your Christmas?" my mother asked, her tone dripping with wounded passive aggression. "It was lovely, actually. Naomi's family was incredibly kind. How nice for you, spending Christmas with strangers while your actual family worried about you. I told you I had plans. I wasn't missing. I was exactly where I said I'd be. You abandoned us on Christmas." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the future I'd already lived. The version where they'd plan an entire Christmas without me and never think twice about it. Where I'd die slowly and alone, and they wouldn't notice until the funeral arrangements needed to be made. "Mum," I said quietly, "you didn't invite me until 3 days before Christmas. You were confirming numbers, not extending an invitation. You forgot about me until you needed a head count." "That's not..." "We didn't forget. You did, or you would have. It doesn't matter." I set my purse down and met her eyes. "I love you, but I'm not going to spend my life waiting to be remembered. I'm building a life where I matter to people because they choose me, not because they're obligated to include me." Emma scoffed. "This is so dramatic. You're acting like we abuse you or something." "No," I agreed. "You don't abuse me. You just forget I exist. And then you get upset when I build a life where that doesn't destroy me anymore." I stayed for an hour. We talked about nothing important. The weather, Emma's wedding plans, my father's work project. Surface conversation between people who shared a last name, but not much else. When I left, I felt lighter than I had in 2 lifetimes. Years passed. I graduated with honours and a portfolio that landed me a position at a prestigious design firm in the city. I moved into a beautiful apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and room for the life I was building. I travelled with Naomi and Jessica to places I'd never made time for in my previous life. I dated, fell in love, had my heart broken, and recovered stronger. I attended Emma's wedding to Trevor, as a guest, not a bridesmaid by mutual agreement. I was polite to my parents at Thanksgiving and sent appropriate gifts for birthdays. I maintained the relationship at a comfortable distance where I gave what I could without sacrificing what I needed. They learned, slowly, that I wasn't the girl who would drop everything for them anymore, that I had priorities and commitments beyond their family gatherings, that I was happy, genuinely happy in a life they hadn't designed for me. My mother struggled with it. She'd call sometimes, voice tight with confusion and hurt, asking when I'd become so independent. I'd remind her that I'd always been independent. She just hadn't noticed because I'd been too busy trying to earn her attention. Emma eventually stopped expecting me to be available at her convenience. We had lunch occasionally, talked about surface things, maintained a relationship that was cordial but no longer codependent. My father, surprisingly, was the one who adapted best. One evening, 3 years after that pivotal Christmas, he called me out of the blue. "Olivia, I just wanted to say, you were right about needing your own life, about the boundaries. Your mother and I, we took you for granted. We kept waiting for you to just be available. and we never really saw how much we were asking you to give up." I held the phone, surprised by the emotion in his voice. "I see you now," he continued. "I see the life you've built and the person you've become, and I'm proud of you. I'm sorry it took me so long." "Thank you, Dad," I whispered. It wasn't everything. It didn't erase the years of casual dismissal or the death I died unloved and unmissed. But it was something, an acknowledgement, a beginning of understanding. 5 years after my rebirth, I got promoted to senior creative director. My firm celebrated with champagne and congratulations. Naomi threw me a party. Jessica wrote a blog post about my success. My phone buzzed with messages from friends and colleagues and mentors who'd seen my work and believed in my potential. My family's group text had 3 messages: a thumbs up emoji from my father, "Congrats," from Emma, and "That's wonderful, dear," from my mother. I smiled at the screen, not because their validation mattered, it didn't, not anymore, but because I'd created a life where it didn't have to. I spent that Christmas in a cabin upstate with Naomi, Jessica, and 4 other friends we'd collected over the years. We cooked together, exchanged thoughtful gifts, told stories by the fireplace. We laughed until our sides hurt and stayed up until dawn talking about dreams and plans and all the versions of ourselves we were still becoming. On Christmas night, I stood on the cabin's deck looking at stars that seemed close enough to touch. My phone sat inside, probably collecting the standard family texts: "Merry Christmas," "Hope you're well," the minimum maintenance of a relationship I'd survived the death of. I thought about that other Christmas, the one where I'd stood outside my family's dining room counting plates that didn't include me. The night that had started a chain of events leading to a cold bathtub and a lonely death. And I thought about the rebirth that had given me the chance to rewrite the ending. I didn't hate them. I didn't even resent them anymore, not really. They were who they were, people who loved within the limits of their awareness, who valued certain kinds of presence over others, who would never quite understand why I'd chosen distance over desperate proximity. But I'd learned the most important truth. Their inability to see me clearly didn't determine my worth. Their forgetfulness didn't make me forgettable. Their exclusion didn't mean I couldn't belong somewhere else, to someone else in a story they would never be central to. I'd died once, unmissed and unmourned. I'd been reborn with the same family, the same potential for exclusion. But this time, I'd walked away before the forgetting could destroy me. I'd built a life in places they'd never know, with people who remembered I existed without being reminded. I'd reclaimed myself. And that was its own kind of justice. Quiet, complete, and entirely mine. Behind me, through the cabin window, I could hear laughter and music. My chosen family, warm and alive and present. Naomi called my name, asking if I wanted more hot chocolate. I turned away from the stars and walked back inside, back to the light and warmth and belonging I'd built from nothing but determination and a second chance. I'd spent Christmas somewhere they'd never know, and I'd never been less alone. The cold no longer frightened me, because I'd learned to build my own warmth, in spaces of my own choosing, with people who saw me clearly and chose to stay. That was the real rebirth, not the moment I woke in my younger body, but the moment I decided I was worth more than their inconsistent affection. I closed the cabin door behind me, leaving the December cold outside where it belonged. And when I was home,